I'm so happy to chat with you today. I devoured this series in one sitting. Um,
Whoa,
I know, which is a lot, but I couldn't
that's heavy.
stop. It was, but I have to say I'm ashamed to say that I did not know of Ruth Ellis before watching this. And there's so much to draw from here. I mean, the parallels between what was going on with her and broken systems in the 1950s and today really hit home. And obviously your gorgeous performance, it was like such a reminder to me of the importance of telling stories like Ruth's to not only understand our past, but to kind of view our present and future more empathetically. So thank you so much. Um,
Thank you.
let's start there. Like, how well did you know Ruth's story before coming on to this project? And then once you started diving deeper, what became your North Star or your kind of guiding light to step into her shoes?
Similarly to you, I didn't know really anything about her story, about her case, and I was really shocked then when I read all four scripts. I couldn't believe that I didn't know about this case that changed our judicial system in the UK. And it was a shocking case at the time. There was mass outcry. And so the fact that it's been neglected from the kind of mainstream history lessons, I think is pretty shocking. Although not completely surprising considering how many women's stories have been neglected from the history books. So I tried to read as expansively, as extensively as I possibly could to understand the way that she'd been perceived at the time as well, because it had been really widely covered in the media, internationally as well, at the time. But the way that she was depicted was so skewed by the kind of classism and misogyny of the era. And she didn't have a voice of her own or like a kind of access channel to the public. So there was no, and I think that she had no instinct to want to clarify. Yeah, kind of kept that apart from her own identity and how she saw herself. So it was a really interesting research process. And I think very much anchored by Carol Ann Lee's book, A Fine Day for a Hanging, which is what this is predominantly based on. And I can't recommend it enough to anyone interested in British history, women's history. It's so well researched, and as you said, kind of so relevant to so much of today. I think we want to feel like we have so many of those issues safely left behind in the 50s, and that's just not the case at all. And so it was, a kind of a real education as a history lesson, but also just again to reflect on how much we still need to improve upon today.
Yeah, what a gift to be able to sort of bring her story to life in such a beautiful way. Um, and to educate all of us. And yeah, I really want to check out the book. I want to know even more, which is the best feeling when you
Yeah.
do something like this. You're like, oh, I want more, I want more.
And there's so much more to read about. There's so much more that obviously we couldn't fit into the 4 hours. So yeah, highly, highly recommend.
Oh my gosh. I also, what I found so profound about not only her, but your performance was the strategy behind every morsel of her being needing to exhibit, the strength and courage needing to not only survive her life, her abusive relationship, the trial, the execution. Can you talk about the creative choices of when to kind of lean into her emotionality and when to lean into her stoicism, and kind of give space to both?
That's such a great question because it was a real kind of exercise and challenge throughout filming because I really had to try and step away from my own instincts of empathizing with her in those moments of intense vulnerability when you feel so protective over that person, knowing that she was stronger and more stoic than I could ever be. And also wanting to let the audience in on what she must have been internally feeling. And so to let that come to the surface a little bit more, I think that's why I love movies and television so much, because with the camera work, you can find a balance that the stoicism and the mask that the jury saw in the court, for example, and that she's putting out to the public. She's very aware of how she wants to be perceived, and she really wanted to be the author of that. And she was very good at it. So you can do that, and yet with the camera so close, you let the audience in. You can, these like micro moments are detectable, and so you can just show a kind of crack in that mask and a kind of just that vulnerability that is just behind her eyes. So that was a really kind of satisfying way, I think, to honor how she presented herself while also showing a more kind of realistic and humanistic side of what was actually happening.
Absolutely. And I could feel all of that. And I think that's what's so heartbreaking, especially during the trial. We know the heartbreak, we know the pain, the grief that is going on underneath the surface. And again, that's a testament to your beautiful performance. I mean, you
Thank
should be
you.
so proud because you did exactly that, which is so difficult to convey the multitudes of what she's feeling, which is so complex and hard
Mm,
for us to understand. It's such a unique position to be in, yet it
mm,
is so relatable. As I feel like as women, we just walk through this world kind of masquerading in ways to
completely.
protect
And having
ourselves.
to regulate your emotions on a minute by minute basis just to kind of stay sane.
Exactly. Also, I just want to say, you have such an amazing way of evoking the past through your performances, especially of historical women.
Thank you.
What kind of like, is it the costumes, is the dialect? Like, what gets you into it right away to kind of, 'cause I
I
know it's
think,
different for every actor. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, I think it is. The costumes are a huge part of it, I think, because it's such a physical manifestation of that exiting yourself and stepping into the shoes literally of someone else. And especially with period pieces, costumes are structured so differently. So like with this, with the 50s, they had returned to the cinched waist, kind of corseted look. Hell. So it really like makes you hold yourself completely differently. It also affects the way that you breathe and therefore the way that you can project. So it changes the kind of pitch of your voice.
Hmm.
So that is instantly so kind of gratifying as a means of stepping into character. And I think yeah, I think I'm drawn to the analysis that is involved in the research of period pieces. So I think that the kind of the extensive reading you've done before, so you know the kind of social context for how that character would regard themselves and want to be perceived, and so you can kind of live in the freedom of that. Then I love it.
Fun, yeah. And also with this one too, it must have been kind of meta as Ruth is also changing her dialect and her appearance um,
Mm.
to kind of fit in to a certain class. That's also really interesting and I'm sure fun to play with.
It was, and it was kind of, again, hard to find that measure of what you want to share with an audience and what was accurate to what Ruth actually did. And I know with that voice, she perfected it. She perfected this RP voice that was possibly slightly more exaggerated than if it was completely natural to you and you'd spoken like that since a kid. But she was really good at it and she never dropped it. You know, there are recordings of her when she's drunk and she doesn't drop a single T. And
Oh,
so I really wanted to honor that. I didn't want to kind of misrepresent how hard she had worked at that. And yet you do need to let the audience in when we only have 4 hours to tell this story, like 4 episodes. You're fighting for opportunity to offer that kind of underlying story without dialogue exposition.
mhm.
So we did have to find more moments to drop the accent a little so that the audience could know that it was how put on it was. But I was reluctant to do so just because just knowing how hard she'd worked it, I
Right.
wanted to honor her. But yeah, I think important to let the audience in.
No, it was very well done. And I could talk about this for hours, but before I let you go, I would be remiss not to bring up one of the most powerful lines I have heard in recent days in a film or a TV series, which is when Ruth says to Toby Jones, who plays her lawyer, no one wants to hear about women bleeding and what men do to make them bleed. I mean, how did it feel to just first read that line? And did you feel the weight of it? I just was like, I was floored. It took my breath away, not only for the
Mm.
context, but the delivery. It was just, yeah,
I think it's where you're so grateful to great writers. I mean, that Kelly Jones can articulate something that so many, if not all of us, feel, but don't know how to, articulate that as eloquently. And it's the shock of reading something like that and how much it immediately resonates with you. As you said, that is kind of equally gratifying to feel represented and seen, and painfully frustrating to have that confirmed also. But again, it makes me feel so grateful to be in this job, in this industry, and part of a kind of storytelling industry where we can hold that mirror up and address that and kind of make audiences or invite audiences to confront that.
absolutely. And that's the magic of it all. That's my time. Thank you so much again. It's always so lovely to talk with you.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you so much for such an interesting conversation. Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh, my pleasure.